Hello, everyone, and good morning. Welcome to our final speaker series presentation of the 2021 academic year. This has been a very exciting year where a number of faculty have come together and presented on a range of topics, sometimes in relation to their discipline and sometimes in relation to their passion. So Professor Bellows has been teaching us something that is both her discipline and her passion, which is helping college students write better, and more organized and thoughtful, and sort of sometimes just even having a plan. And so Kristen spent some time in the first session where she was just talking about ways to encourage students to write, because sometimes they just can't get their ideas and so forth down. And she talked about using many micro lesson type, events where you're demoing and recording these video presentations and putting them in class, sort of modeling as a way to encourage students to follow your steps, as you show them how to do things. And then in the second one, she talked about diverse students and a number of techniques there. One was the PEAL. I really like that one. PEAL is purpose, evidence, analysis, and then link. And the link is like link it to the next paragraph or whatever, back to your thesis statement in that paragraph, a transition statement, whatever you need to do. And that was very neat. And then she talked about at the last, the third session, video conferencing. And she talked about sort of sharing screens and using sort of an annotation system where you're going through and correcting and massaging content while they are watching and giving you ideas. And so you're sort of together, creating something, and then they'll take that idea and be able to apply it to their work, you hope, right? So in this particular session, Kristen's going to talk about voice, right? And we know voice is something very interesting when we talk about academic writing, because sometimes you're told not to have a voice, right? So anyway, Kristen, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you very much. All right, let me see if I can get this going here. All right. Thank you for coming. It's so exciting to see some new faces and everybody who has been following these sessions this summer. I really appreciate you coming back, and I hope that the techniques and strategies have been helpful and applicable to your classes and really to your own sort of trajectory in helping your students become better writers. So that's what I'm really focusing on. This is the last of the four, and one thing that I like to do is just really get your feedback during the essential question and the question and answer bit at the end to get a sense of how I can help even more. So at the end, I'll ask you if you have any suggestions. And Kevin and I were talking about just for my maybe applying for the second series and just continuing these sessions on helping you all try to figure out how to help your students and make them better writers and more confident writers ultimately. So today we're going to really focus on developing style and voice in academic writing. And I know that for a lot of us, it's very difficult to figure out how to integrate someone's own style and their voice in all different genres, because we know obviously in middle school and high school we've focused a little bit on creative writing, at least some of us. And it's very easy to sort of pull that apart and say, okay, this is a creative writing course. I know you put style and voice in there, but what I want to encourage you to do is really not only identify voice and style in your own students' writing in college, but also really encourage them to use it. And obviously this has to be according to the assignment itself, but in every genre of writing, there can be both style and voice that gives the sense that the student is an individual and an individual writer, and that they can look at their body of work and say, okay, this is really sort of unique to me. And I think that that's really important, especially if we look at the very beginning, the first session that I taught was all about brainstorming and using those creative outlets in order to suss out a thesis statement, for example, or the topic of a long paper or even a dissertation. And those creative moments can really help a student become more confident and more skilled at writing just across the board in college classes, but also in their lives. So I'm going to go through our presentation. Part of this presentation is I wanted to implement a lot more models in this one, so that I'm going to really go through the differences between voice and style and how we can see them and how we can emphasize and illuminate these two aspects in our writers. So I have several examples and we'll just dive in. If you have any questions throughout it, please let me know. There we go. All right. Developing style and voice in academic writing. Welcome to more writing techniques. A special thank you. Thank you so much for participating in this final presentation and supporting student writing. Your engagement and effort in learning and applying these techniques can help create better writers in your courses and lessen the workload. That's one of the reasons why I wanted to do this series, is so that professors can understand that we can make our lives a little bit easier by front loading some of the work, but also really engaging with our students in very specific and focused forms. As always, I look forward to your questions and feedback. So today our objectives are, excuse me, I'm a little bit sick. Our whole family got a cold. So there's that too. Luckily, I don't have the roofers banging on our roof today. But so today our objectives today are, in order to promote skill building and deep learning of the strategies and techniques, we're going to focus on 4 specifics. Reflecting on our approaches during writing instruction, because sometimes I think it's interesting to look back on ourselves and say, okay, where am I coming from when I evaluate my students' writing? Considering the importance of style and voice in academic writing, defining and identifying these 2 aspects within the various genres, and acquiring techniques to encourage better writing skills. Okay, so I always like to sort of backtrack and kind of review what we talked about last session. In tools and hacks for writing instruction during video conferencing, we discussed advantages of video conferencing and our own challenges with it. That's the reflective segment. Student needs for in-depth interactive online learning. Now that so many of our students are taking online classes, it's really important that we do give them the option to work with us one-on-one if we can during our office hours, or just even if it's just a very brief 5-minute video on writing instruction that you send out to them. That will also really help them. Even if your course doesn't demand for you to be online, it's really helpful maybe just to start brainstorming how could you help them in sort of smaller ways that will also help ultimately your own instruction, really. And then we analyzed how important video conferencing is to student engagement. And we talked about 2 specific techniques. The first one is screen sharing, where you can take a document and upload it and then annotate right on there. You could do this with Screencast-O-Matic. You can do it with Turnitin. You can do it on Zoom. And I just wanted to present the Zoom one since we were on that platform. And then breakout rooms, and that really helps with collaboration. All right, so here's your essential question for the day. What is your perspective on encouraging a student's style and voice in academic writing? Do you think it's important or not? Please explain your response. So I'd like to just give you a minute, just think about that, or just look over your notes if you're already prepared, and then let's talk about it.
Is this open mic right now, or are we in thinking stage?
We're in thinking stage for about
Okay, I'm
30 more
sorry.
seconds.
Just let me know.
Yes. So let's take 30 more seconds. All right. Let's take a couple more seconds. Okay, does anybody want to jump in and start? Kevin, you look like you're percolating with ideas.
I just never want to, be the first one if other people have ideas. But I know sometimes if I go first, it allows other people to think or to piggyback off of maybe something that I said. So what I always sort of learned in especially the college level is, except maybe in English class, and all the other disciplines, voice is sort of minimized, it seems. It doesn't sound as academic. If it sounds voice kind of sounds informal sometimes, right? Because it sounds like the way the person talks, and it's good. I think it's a good thing. But here's the thing that I think occurs, Kristen, is I think almost especially students fresh out of high school who might not have had this opportunity to learn about what even voice is they almost infuse too much of their voice. And it just sounds like they're talking, instead of presenting an academic idea. And that may be why they just meander in their writing sometimes, is because it's just voice, it's just talking, right? They're just explaining stuff, as opposed to an academic writing. You're typically going to have to think of, a thesis and your evidence and, laying out your ideas in an organized way and minimizing your opinion slight, impression, I guess I should say, which voice sometimes can give. It sounds more like it's too personal, as opposed to academic, where it has to be professional and almost dry and stale to some degree. But I think what happens is when they get to college, we don't encourage it often in other disciplines besides maybe in the language arts. But in the sciences and so forth, voice may not be a high priority. So we probably don't encourage it much there. I think you have to use both. I think you have to know when to use voice and when not to use voice, I think, is the more important thing.
Sure. Yeah, I think that's a wonderful sort of acknowledgement of the fact that for a certain period of our education, generally, we're encouraged to use our voice and style and sort of the nuances. And if we, use colloquialisms, that can be they can be integrated into our creative writing and that kind of thing. But then when you zip on over to high school science, you're not supposed to do that. And ultimately, what I would like you to sort of start to just really consider is the fact that they can still be melded into any genre. It's just, it depends on the purpose, it depends on the assignment, and it really depends on how well you can craft your own ideas about the subject. So it doesn't have to be so dichotomous as to only in creative writing class or only in the humanities can you use your voice and your style. So I'm going to show you some examples of that today, where students could have used or have used their style and voice in different ways. And it's in academic writing, all different kinds. Dr. Bailey, you had an idea? Nice to see you, by the way.
Actually, I was thinking, I thought that was really cool that you had dream big. And for me, when you think about encouraging students to improve in their academic writing, think about it when you're encouraging someone to write, as well as what we do as faculty is to help these students to improve their critical thinking. And for them to be able to do this, you cannot write if you're not reading. And so the comprehension comes into perspective as well. So they're reading, so they have to kind of put this into words while they're writing them. And so maybe some of those intonations that you mentioned maybe last time, comes into play where they, as they write now, the tones that they put in the paper allows you to see where is their opinion going. How have they comprehended what they have read, which now they are in their own words putting into writing. So I think this is really big for them, because it allows them to kind of expand even in their comprehension. And of course, you cannot continue to write if you don't read. That's my thought on this.
Oh, that's such a good point. I mean, being a good writer really is supported by being a good reader. Or even if you're not a good writer or reader, they go hand in hand. The more you read, the better writer you'll become, and vice versa. And I think that's really important. And that's one way that I know that in a lot of high school classes that our students haven't been exposed to lots of different genres and different writers. I teach a poetry course through Harvard, and we go from Emily Dickinson to Allen Ginsberg, and they're drastically different kinds of writers. But if our students weren't exposed to those absolutely different forms and different styles and different voices and different structures, just in how the poets create their own works of, real works of art, then our students wouldn't understand that there are so many different variations of what they can use. I mean, it is, in some ways, it's a behavior that you can mimic, you can mirror, you can try it out, you can practice, so that you figure out what is your voice, what is your style. Could those change in terms of what kind of assignment you make? So yeah, great points. Thank you. Any other thoughts? I think there's Dr. Gano or Dr. Shadi. All right. Well, thank you for those. If you have any questions, please just raise your hand, and I can call on you. We can stop. So don't feel like we have
I would say for Norma and Dan, Norma teaches in nursing.
Okay.
And Dan teaches, business and economics. So in those two professions, again, voice is somewhat minimized,
Yes.
and I was curious too, Kristen, you probably know more about MLA and, APA and other various styles.
Yeah.
Do you think we have sometimes beaten into our writers through education, where we've created writing to be so formulaic, and template like driven, follow these patterns and just do that we've sort of removed the humanness from it, and which is where style and voice come in. That's where our own personalities can be heard and expressed through the words. But we sort of remove that when we get too formulaic.
Sure.
I'm sorry, Christian. I'm sorry. I'm jumping in here. Kevin, thank you for responding on my behalf. I was trying to work on my microphone. So pardon me, Christian, I couldn't answer you right away.
That's fine. Don't worry.
Well, okay, ahead, actually, just go ahead. Thoughts?
Go ahead, please.
Do you have any thoughts, Dan, on this topic? Like when you are working with business students, voice and style, do you allow them to sort of express, the way they want to talk, or do you have them follow specific styles or templates? And I might not be asking the question correctly, Kristen. But I'm trying to make sure I put it sometimes in language that maybe writing folks would understand better too. Because for a lot of folks, they don't learn about voice and style in their academic preparation to become a doctor of something else. It's heavy in, like you said, the humanities and language arts, in particular, communication and English courses.
Mhm.
But it isn't really talked about or taught or even acknowledged in most other courses.
Yeah.
So it's kind of foreign to even to faculty, I guess I'm saying, not only to students.
Right. Obviously, there are certain guidelines that we need to follow as far as the writing style, as we know at the APA, and I'm very, very strict on that, because my expectation is my students should know by now how to write academic papers and follow the academic writing rules. However, as far as the speaking is concerned, there are certain things that are not allowed of course, in the classroom environment. But since, as you mentioned, Kevin, that my courses are about economics, finance, I do not really have the knowledge of guiding them to follow a certain particular style of academic communication or speech in the classroom. And that's one of the reasons I'm in here trying to listen to Khriseten and learn from her.
Well, thank you so much for coming. I really appreciate that. I don't think we have a lot of guidance generally as instructors to say, okay, here's my discipline, here's the course I'm teaching, just go and write in a very structured, formulaic way. That's what we have been taught, I think, as generally as instructors. And I think one thing that I know just in anecdotal feedback that I've gathered from my colleagues over the years, maybe the last 20 years, is that we're feeling that students don't have a real unique presence, that they're just following the rules, that it's the Common Core, and the Common Core has also kind of, I think, stifled a lot of students' abilities to be more analytical, therefore more creative in their writing and their reading and just in their thought processes across the board. So that's the whole point of this session, is to figure out how can we emphasize it in our students so that it doesn't bleed over, over the structure that you need for your specific course, but you can feel like they're jazzed about it, they're enthusiastic about it. That's what I'm always looking for. Even if I don't agree with somebody's thesis statement, I still want to help them get to the most succinct and interesting form of it, and therefore they can use their, if this is an analytical piece that they're working on, they can use their evidence, their analysis, and imbue those with style and voice in order for it to feel like it's powerful, that it means something, that there is some authority behind their words. And that's what we want to sort of emphasize as instructors, to make sure that they feel like they can write really well, and we can help them and guide them along the way.
Kristen, I don't want to interrupt, but Norma had her hand raised. Norma, did you want to say something? Do you
I think your mic's up.
Mute me here.
Okay, yeah, very good.
When you were talking about my working with the nursing program, our students write in a different manner, basically, when it comes to the nursing, because what we're wanting to see is how they explain what they gotten from the content and the concepts that they are trying to learn.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's a little bit different with what they write compared to writing like what I write for my papers on my doctorate program that I'm doing right now. It's a little bit different, and I have trouble sometimes going back and forth between the two, especially when I've been writing my papers a lot, and then I go back and look at their papers. It's like, well, why didn't they say it this way? But it's their way of, we encourage them to explain what they understand from it.
Mm-hmm.
It has to come from their voice of what they understand.
Sure.
Makes it a little bit different. Yes, we really push the APA formatting and everything, but at the beginning levels, we're not quite as severe with the formatting and the word structure, because we're more interested in hearing what they have learned
Mm.
about a certain concept or a disease state or something like that. So the nursing papers are a little bit different when our students are writing them. So it makes it a little tricky at times when we're looking at what they're reading. And sometimes we have to kind of read between the lines because they're not very good at fully explaining things. But I can see where we have to have some form of formality to it.
Mhm.
But it's a little harder to bring it across.
That's a really good point. I think especially in the sciences, in the nursing program, I know a lot of my students at USU are in the nursing programs, and I think they have to vacillate between feeling sort of a self-consciousness about being highly objective in their writing, and therefore even in their discussion posts, they might be a little bit more removed. But in fact, what it sounds like you're saying is you want them to translate in some ways their textual knowledge into their own experience and then really write about that, whether it's
Yeah.
through examples or their own translation and their own interpretation. And I think that's actually really important to hear because, you know, I think a lot of people just assume that the sciences, especially in the medical fields, that they just have to be objective and this is how you say it. And actually, I have an example that might help with this because it sort of gives you, the first example gives you a sort of a very dry look at how writing can come across to a patient, and therefore how you could change it so that it's much closer to understanding the distance between the patient and the medical professional. So yeah, let's go through it. And if you have questions, just let me know. And I really hope this technique, especially the modeling, will help you say, oh, okay, I'm identifying this voice and this style in the student. So therefore I can help emphasize it so I get to know how they understand the material that I'm teaching. Ultimately, that's what I'd like. So let's go on. Please let me know if you have any questions. There we go. All right. All right. It went back to the beginning. All right. So here we go. I just wanted to talk about just the most common types of writing. So narrative, that's characterized by a main character. You'll see, the setting engages with the problem. A lot of our movies are created on this narrative voice. We focus on the author's purpose and tone and voice and structure, sentence structure, organization, and word choice. You could do this in your courses. Let's say you develop a course. Maybe this is part of your discussion in the very beginning of your units. And then analytical, this is where you have to develop a thesis that supports, this is supported by the main claim, using proof from the text as evidence or quotes, and then you have some kind of conclusion for as closure. Expository, there's a lot of description, explanation on a particular idea, range of topics. It could go from human experience to inventions to nature, emotions, politics, family, hobbies, and many more. So that's generally the genre of expository writing. Persuasive, maybe a lot of you use this and have assignments that use this, the development of logical arguments. That's certainly necessary in all of the courses that I teach, and a cohesive summary, logic, and emotional appeal. So this is where ethos, pathos, and logos could come in, and you really sort of have an emotional kind of connection with the reader. And then argumentative, maybe a lot of your assignments really focus on argumentative. So it cites scientific studies, statistics, quotes from experts, highlights, your own surveys and questionnaires, usually in the third person. First and second person are not used in most of these, except for maybe the narrative and expository. And then well-researched facts from reliable sources. Kevin, you were talking about APA, and that's really big in the classes that I teach at USUN, at Harvard as well. And then the claim has to convince the reader. You have, whether it's a hypothesis in, in science, or it's in an analytical paper. Okay, so here we go. I really want to pull apart it. These two definitions of style and voice, they're similar, but I really want to define them so that you can start saying, okay, yeah, I identify those in this particular writing. So why are style and voice important, you ask? Here's a quote from Brian Clems, who writes for Reader's Digest. A strong voice helps you make every word count, especially establishing consistency across your website or body of work, and most importantly, helps you grab your reader's attention and establish a relationship with them. For all genres, you need a relationship with your reader, or they're not going to listen to you. They're not going to read you. They're not going to be convinced by you. The second one is developing an appropriate voice and style in academic writing establishes authority and respect for the writer. I really like that, establishing an authority. I think across the board, we can say that we want our writers to establish their own authority and their thoughts and their ideas and interpretations, and be able to write well and proficiently, so that we understand how much they're learning, really. All right, here's one more quote. Why are style and voice important in writing? A common purpose of academic writing is to present a clear position and defend or support it. Your reader wants to see that you have a personal voice on your subject and use it successfully to build an academic argument. And that's from Writers Co-op. All right, so here's the difference. In writing, style and voice are very specific and individualistic. What is the difference? So style, if you focus on this, and if you'd like, just take a screenshot of this, because one thing that I have done in my career is just sort of vacillated between these two to make sure that I was helping my students understand the difference. So if I say, wow, you got great style because of this particular facet of their writing, then I want to say, all right, but just boost up your voice, and how can you do this? And then I'll give them 2 or 3 suggestions as to how they can do that. So style, think of word choice, sentence structure, how they create their sentences, sentence arrangement, and all work together as they establish the mood, images, and the meanings in text. So you can think about this as, someone has a personal style, how you write, or remember it by personal clothing style, how you put an outfit together. You put the sentences together. Maybe some of them are, I'll just go down to the indications. So this is how you can identify it in your students' writing. I'm going to put this up here. Okay. Diction, which is word choice. What words do they choose specifically? Sentence structure. Do they use long or short, or a combination of sentence structure? Grammar, use of punctuation, and dialogue. So just as an example from my own writing, I've always written, and I don't profess to be a writer necessarily. I would say I'm much more of an educator and I love writing, and I love instructing writing. But one thing I love to do, whether I'm journaling or I'm writing poetry or I'm brainstorming, is I love to use long descriptive, I love medical terms. I love diving into the 5 senses. So I'll use very long sentences, and then use a very short sentence to sort of pack a punch. And then I'll use a long descriptive sentence, and then I'll really go in with something that maybe is more emotional, just in my own writing. And so that is my style when I'm writing my own sort of expository writing. In poetry, it might be different. I'm very specific on what words I choose. That's the diction. And then if you go to voice, so you can see how they sort of thread together. a mixture of vocabulary, an attitude or tone. Dr. Bailey was talking about your tone. How do you develop your own tone? That's the feeling that you get from the words that you choose. And then the syntax, which makes up phrases, sentences, and the paragraphs and how they flow. So think about formal or informal writing. We were talking, Norma was talking about just, this sort of, how do you translate speech, your own speech, into formal writing? What is the message in your writing? So voice is all about message. It's a little bit broader and sort of should be imbued throughout the whole piece or throughout the body of work. The indications, the things that you can look for, specific terms used, the feeling the audience gets from what the writer conveys, and identified over, across all the assignments or one whole paragraph or one whole paper. And I'll show you the difference in this modeling today too. Any questions on that? It's a little bit heavy in there. Dr. Bailey?
You make it sound so good. You make it sound so good, and I'm trying to almost jump into the page of your writing. Makes me wonder. I know that kind of sound very basic, but sometimes I'm not afraid to be basic. So I almost want to see what's a little bit of maybe a paragraph from you. The way you explained about having long sentences and then have a shorter one, almost probably that is more expressive. And I'm just that curious and basic. Like, I want to see just a paragraph of something that is meaningful from you, if you can share that.
Sure. Yes. And actually, I was going to put one up here, but you know what I'll do after this presentation, I'll send you one. If you'd all like to, and I'll just send it out there. Maybe I'll just write it afterwards and I'll let you know. Yeah, sure. I'm happy to share mine.
Thank you. I read a lot as a high school student back in Nigeria. I read everything I could lay my hands on, but I see myself a little rusty these days. And having someone who this is your field, I kind of want to feel what maybe professional writing looks like again.
Sure. Yeah. And that's wonderful that you're from Nigeria, because I studied a lot of Nigerian writers. Chimamanda Adichie is one of my favorites. Chris Abani, just absolutely. I love
most of the books.
Wonderful. Great.
Okay. Thanks.
Thank you for asking.
Thank you.
Okay. So here you go. Here's the first technique. Actually, I'm just presenting one general technique, but I'm going to go into the modeling of more of sort of the nuances. So verbally or in written form. So I was thinking about this from last time, and a lot of you just that you don't have online interaction with students. You can do this through Turnitin. You can do it through Screen Doc-O-Matic. You can do it through Zoom, or you can just do it, make your comments if you're commenting just on the sidebar for your students. You can do this, you can implement some of these ideas while you're correcting. So you don't have to do it face-to-face or, online in a video conference. You can just do this in your comments. But what I want everybody to start thinking about is how you can help them become better, more fulfilled writers through their style and their voice. So you can walk students through the parts of their papers to enhance their style by doing this. Using previous techniques from focus correction. So one of my previous sessions talked about focus corrections. Choose a section. Maybe it's just the first 3 lines, or it's one paragraph, or it's the abstract of a paper. Hone in on the purpose. So we really want to focus on 3 things: the purpose, the tone, and the diction. First of all, ask yourself, okay, what's the assignment? Who is the audience for this piece of writing? Maybe it's an academic forum. Maybe it's a discussion board with other students. So you really have to, that's part of it. Then sentence structure, how the sentences are crafted, long, short, combination. The diction, which words were chosen and why. What I like to ask is, well, what would be the effect if he or she or they chose other words rather than these particular words? Why did he or she choose these specific words? And what is the connotation and the denotation, the different levels of these words? That will really help a student understand, oh, okay, I have to be more academic in my writing, but how do I do that? So diction is really important. And then tone, the writer's message to the reader and how it's meant to affect the audience. All right, so here's an example. This is actually from one of my papers this summer. I'm teaching a poetry course through Harvard. And this is a guy who is Serbian, actually. Is very, very articulate and speaks English as a third language, really loves writing, loves analysis. And this particular assignment is it's essentially the rough draft of the final paper, which is due next week. So I'm going to read it over, and then I'd like to talk about, this is just the first paragraph, and this is what you can do with your students. He titled it Romantic's Message for Modernity. And I think that's really cool. I mean, titles are so important, and it gives us a sense of what kind of writer he is already. Human history is a story of an unending and escalating quest for dominance over the surroundings, the elements, the resources, and each other. With the help of reason and science, we have strived to overcome our innate limitations. Yes, our bodies are weak, but our minds devise machines to overcome all sorts of physical constraints. Yes, we're mortal, but our creations can outlive us and perpetrate our aspirations. So this is his first sentence. His first paragraph. And what I'd like to do is, the first thing is, let's go into style. So all the blue, I've indicated style. And if you go up to, can you see my cursor here? Okay, great. So what I see in this, the first thing I see is, I look at his structure. Wow, Dr. Bailey, you were talking about long and short sentences. This is essentially two sentences. And you just have to acknowledge that and say, okay, human history, all right. First sentence is pretty complex, but the second sentence is long-winded, interesting, long-winded, but it's also punctuated by his own punctuation. So the author's tone is exacting, it's rhetorical, because I know that through the words that he chose. Certain, it's formal, it's highly critical, analytical, the message is optimistic. And he's asking the audience to consider, like, look at this, okay? So I know that because I'm looking at, first of all, Romantic's message. All right, already, why did he choose those words? A Romantic's message, okay. That leads me into thinking, wow, that's what he wants me to start thinking about. Romantic is a pretty optimistic word. All right, I'll take that as I read it through. So then I pull out elements we have strived to overcome. Sorry, this is blocked out. He says, our bodies are weak, overcome, outlive. Those words, especially the our, he already wraps the reader into this collectivism, this sense of, wait a second, our bodies might be weak, but our bodies, we're all experiencing the same thing. And that in itself allows us to understand he's sort of professing this, ultimate universal kind of struggle that we have with existence. So there's your tone. Dr. Bailey, you were talking about your tone. There you go. All of these words help out understanding and developing the tone. And then if you look at the voice, those are in the yellows down below here. There's one long sentence with colons to separate ideas. It's a run-on sentence, ultimately. That doesn't bother me as much. And I'll tell you how I would correct this as well. But I think it's really interesting because he's using his own voice and his own style to make such a long sentence. And what is he doing? He's using collective pronouns. The diction is hyperbolic. He's not neutral in this. It's argumentative, not in terms of fighting, but in terms of creating an argument. You know, it's convincing, and it's science and philosophy based. I think that's really interesting too. So human history, this is another little bit. I was thinking he was also using alliteration there. You know, so here's a writer who really knows what he's doing generally. He knows how to craft words. And at the same time, he could also do this. We could make this even more succinct. So one thing that I would do is ask him to look at his need for repetition. Does he need it? Does he need dominance and dominance again? Is it sort of overblown? And then the second sentence, I would say that make that into one more sentence and really combine some of the ideas, because I think even though it's so like the energy and the power of this first paragraph is really beautiful, and I always want to emphasize that. I would also say, I think your ideas would flow better. And I also think that they would be more powerful if you brought this second sentence into 3 sentences and cut out some of the redundancy. And then, you know, I feel confident that he would go back and say, yeah, okay, let me try this out. So it could be that you could just say, let me try this out. What's going to happen? That's not too risky, you know? Any questions about that?
Kristen, I
Yes.
do have a comment, and thank you. I think this is what Amaka was looking for, was an example, you know, when you kind of pick it apart and show them what we mean by style and voice. So thank you for doing that. But as I was looking at this, I thought, yes, this kind of, and use the word beautiful, you know, and I think it is. I think that is a good description. But in certain disciplines, this is not ever how you would watch them. You would read them introducing a topic in economics or a topic in nursing. There would not be the beautifulness, you know, the beauty, I should say, of the words and all this that is being woven typically in those kinds of discipline. I'm not saying they don't ever have those in certain types of courses, like maybe theory, but most of stuff is not meant to be opinion. It sort of is a demonstration of knowledge of facts that you've learned. And then, like Norma was saying, when they're going through and reading, while yes, people are adding their voice, Norma specifically searching for keywords that demonstrate that the student has listed the 4 steps necessary to complete this task properly without killing someone. You know?
Yep.
No,
I get that. And
the beauty is often overlooked.
Mm.
You know, because we're searching for the facts that demonstrate that this person has learned the knowledge that we need to know that they've learned.
Yeah.
And that was my only observation. I'm not saying it's good or bad, but for Amaka, and Amaka teaches in the humanities. She works in the School of Arts and Sciences, and I think it's like psychology and sociology, most likely, Amaka, right? That you typically teach, but you could teach a variety. And in that kind of course, yes, these kinds of you know, introductions and sort of freedom with words to create beauty is more, it has, you know, more opportunity to grow in that soil than maybe as students get deeper into a more, like we said, science driven. I'm not saying science can't be this way.
Yeah.
But it typically isn't. It's meant to be, like you said, sort of just very formal, straight to the point. You know, don't tell us your opinion. Don't make it flowery.
Yes, and I acknowledge that, and I recognize that. One of the reasons why I wanted to lead with this is so that you could say, oh, wow, that is really an incredible sort of crafting of ideas and thoughts and definitions and all that. Don't worry, I have more examples that might be applicable to the sciences, so that we can also say, wait, we could use this as well. Yeah.
You know, one thing, Kristen, as you move on, that I've often thought the easiest way to maybe understand voice is if you can sit down with 2 pieces of paper, or 3 or 4, however many papers you want to read, and be able, without knowing who that student is, identify the student that probably wrote it. And it's not based on spelling errors and that kind of stuff, but it's by hearing their voice, you know, even though they're all writing the same thing. And you have to know your students to do that, but the sense that seemed to be a more helpful sort of explanation sometimes to non-writing folks, you know, about voice.
Yeah, and really going across the assignments, but you can even do this when you look at your discussion boards. And this is the next one that I'm bringing up. This is a course that I teach, which is information and media literacy. And this is based, I'll show you the assignment up here is in the course information and media literacy, students are asked to compare reliable and untrusty sources for a final paper. This is a discussion post. So it could be very dry. I mean, I'm actually sometimes surprised that some of these students they'll write paragraphs about this and they'll start learning about, some of this course also teaches, it has a couple units on APA formatting, and it sounds very dry and sort of boring, but they make it kind of interesting. And here's one of the posts. Okay. The first source I searched for was role of the media in processing of democratization and consolidation. There was more than one author for this article with a quick glimpse of the journal and its resources. It appears to be a trustworthy article. It has a reputable audience in the business world and financial markets. Its purpose to inform the business world of the concerns regarding the media influence of democratization. It cites many different 16 publications and references affiliated with major universities. Scholarly journals typically require a peer review done before a publication is done, given more weight to the publication. The publication has many work cites, statements from the previous articles and research to validate the argument the author is trying to convey. The authors reference direct data and are unbiased and do not directly give any opinion regarding the concerns of the impact on the culture. To play devil's advocate, it doesn't give preference to the authority of the authors and the timeliness of the article. The article was written in 2011. Kind of dry, lots of terms there. It's very structured. It is, the audience essentially is the group of colleagues taking this course, but it also is very highly academic. So if I look at down below, yes, voice, look at the voice. So voice, the moments of voice in the phrases, there's positive diction, tone that the author is conveying to the audience about the subject, academic specific vocabulary. So the voice, just what I underlined with a quick glimpse of the journal. They could have said this totally differently. He could have said, its resources appear to be trustworthy. That is very dry, it's very sort of matter of fact, but with a quick glimpse of the journal, that's such a cool little moment of this student's voice. And down below, giving more weight or to play devil's advocate. Those are little details that allows a student to really sort of come into his own in this piece. If you look at style, all the blue style, mainly simple sentence structure, short sentences, subject, varied construction, academic wording, course-specific vocabulary, evidence, third, omniscient, objective perspective, repetition of sentence starters. So one thing that I would say that he said, the source, the role of media, there's evidence, there was, it appears, its purpose, and then all the purple, those are all repetitious words. And if you took those out and you asked your student, okay, this is a great first draft, but look at all the repetition. That repetition is sort of drowning out your ideas. So that's one thing that you could say, okay, focus on that. The publication is probably 4 or 5 times in here, article, they're unnecessary because it really doesn't get to a very succinct way of creating the style and the voice and whether I know this person understands the assignment. So that's one thing that you could think about. And if you look at the green box down below, this is how I would correct this or guide them. In order to enhance the style and voice, edit out redundant wording and substitute for more descriptive diction. Very sentence structure. As you can see, so many of the sentences start out with it has, it appears, its purpose, it cites. Those drag drag your sentences down. So one thing you could do is ask them to combine sentences, or really be aware of using a gerund in the beginning of a sentence. So while its purpose is this, you have sort of a dependent clause, and then you have another one. You can be a very academic writer while varying your sentence structure. And then the other ones are insert more convincing argumentative words to develop the claim. Transitional words or phrases would help the flow in building ideas. Any thoughts on this one?
You know, I'm so sorry, I'm talking a lot today, but this is very
Don't be sorry.
interesting to me. My thoughts about this, and also I wanted to talk about the paragraph that you just, the last paragraph, then weave it into this. For example, if you look at that last paragraph, yes, even though it appears that, did I just use the word appeared? Even though it appears that the student had repeated some of his words or her words, I'm not sure whether it's his or hers, you see that, like in my own area as a psychologist, most of the time when we give them like discussion questions, we have, or discussion questions or assignments, we have like a word count that the student we expect them to reach a certain minimum word count. And of course, this word count is part of the responses that we expect, which means you can write on this topic as long as. So they're being able to use some of these languages or even repeat some words allows them to fulfill this word count. But if they learn to be, let me say, really good writers, like the last one that you, the last paragraph, 2 paragraphs that you showed us, a student like that with those words, if you look at some of his writing or her writing, I'm not sure whether it's his or hers. If you look at some of the writing, you will discover that this student, even though that he says a particular word, for example, human consolidation, I just made this up. If he said something like that, that student, when he had the semicolon, what he did was he used so many descriptive words to explain what he meant. Mm-hmm. And this is what we are wanting students to do, to be able to say, okay, this is the what an article said. However, this is my opinion about this article. Mm-hmm. Okay, so they're able, in their own words, intonation, all this good stuff you told us, they could use that to express themselves better and be clear. But of course, for example, if I'm the one grading this paper, I'm looking at the person who says the role of the media in process of democratization and all that. And I'm like, where did you get this from? Mm-hmm. I would like to know. That is a quotation. And so for someone like me, I want you to back it up with a scholarly article or books. And then of course, go on, because you want to meet the word count, then go on to explain your opinion or perspective of what you've written. Sorry, I didn't want to take your time, but that's just when I look at it, but it's really good. I love it.
Well, thank you for your input. Yeah, I think that it's really, really important for us to understand how to guide them through that and say, okay, here, and modeling will really help that. That's why I wanted to present these ideas, because in order for them to understand how to change, you have to guide them. And we can't just assume that they've gotten everything that they should have, in high school and beginning years of college.
One quick comment to everybody, because I'm sure some of you are thinking, well, I have 100 students. How can I sit down with 100 students and do this one-on-one with every student, every week as they're submitting these 10-page, papers and stuff. But look at what Khriseten just did. You don't have to meet with every student. What you can do is have an example, that you've pulled up, and don't identify students, get permission, that kind of stuff. But then you go through in a little mini micro, recording lesson and tools that she's been talking about, and annotated, active annotation, all this kind of the strategies that she's been talking about, and do it now live with a piece of of text and go through and use the color coding and explain that to students and say, look, this is how you can improve it, and look at the redundancy, and don't start every sentence the same way, and et cetera, et cetera. And Amaka can say, and don't forget to add, references to support your claims, and et cetera. But that one little, 5-minute demo recording and then post that in your classroom is going to save you a world of headache and time of having to do this individually, is my only recommendation. It's a great technique, and you can do a lot, I think, by sort of mass modeling, like Khriseten mentioned.
Great. Dr. Arshadi?
Yes, actually, I have a very simple question. And how many words in a sentence is excessive and makes a sentence to be a long sentence? And how many sentences in one paragraph is excessive and makes paragraph to be long? Is this subjective, or we have kind of approximate numbers to say, hey, if you use this number of the words in a sentence is too long and number of sentences in a paragraph is too long? Is it subjective, or there is some guidelines?
Well, it really depends on the assignment that you've given your students. Maybe you just want to focus on specific, let's say an abstract, and an abstract could be between 3 and 5 sentences. So you can say, and I think that this is helpful for students, your abstract cannot be more than 5 sentences. And that means that they have sort of a boundary in terms of what they have to share, which means that they have to have a purpose. They have to be really succinct in their writing. But something like this, there's no word count at all. They have to post at least 10 sentences generally, and I didn't share the whole post, but in my classes, I encourage 6 to 10 sentences for each discussion post. So I usually have 2 or 3 discussion questions during each weekly unit. So it really depends, and there's no formula to say, no, you can only have 2 sentences or anything like that for a paragraph. For some of my humanities classes, especially my poetry analysis or other classes that are in the humanities, I usually shoot for 6 to 10 sentences for the introduction. And then the other paragraphs really depend on your evidence and your analysis. I mean, it really depends on how long the assignment is. Maybe it's a dissertation, so therefore you're going to have longer paragraphs. But yeah, so I think you could tailor it to your classes. And if you're really just trying to figure out in the very beginning of your course how your students write, say, give them a word count or a sentence count and see how they write. And then you could say, okay, great, you're doing really well, or you need to work on, your sentence structure, using more course related vocabulary, or I need to know how much you've understood from the article you just read, so add 2 more sentences. Like that's, you could sort of progressively expand that way. Let me show you one more, and I think Norma, you'll be interested in this especially. This is, I was thinking about how many people are in the medical field and how sometimes we just think, oh, well, they're just, medical professionals are just supposed to tell us the truth or tell us the facts. And there's a way that you could use your writing to obviously convey the facts, but also be nuanced about it. So here's an example. This is a first draft of essentially just a blurb for treatment that a patient with MS would receive or could have received. Let's see, I'm going to put this over here. So the first draft, here's an example. After the initial consultation, patients have the option to be directed to physical therapy services. Physical therapy procedures may include sessions designated to increase mobility. Contact this following service or PT consultation, St. Gregory Hospital at 800-556-8790. for me, this is very dry. It's lacking in a connection of personal words that creates a dry, impersonal message to the patient that can feel sterile and unempathic. And again, we're thinking about our audience, and this has to be, you don't want to put I in there, right? Because this is not a narrative, but it's to patients. And it doesn't matter, I think, both my parents were doctors, and I sort of grew up in this household where data was really, really important, and you had to sort of back up your claim, whatever it was, even at the dinner table. But you can also imbue your own style and voice in there. So if you look at the revised draft, who can physical therapy do for me, or what can physical therapy do for me? Physical therapy for multiple sclerosis may provide relief in mobility function, reduction in joint pain, and assistance from breathing difficulties. Possible treatment options may include stretches and aquatic therapy, as well as yoga. After your initial consultation, your PT will work with you to develop an individualized treatment plan to help you achieve our treatment goals. Call us today to receive your consultation. St. Gregory Hospital, 800-556-8790. First of all, if you look at this over here in the blue, the ideas are more developed. For me, we have, in the blue, it's all style. For me, provide, the mobility function, reduction in joint pain, assistance, possible stretches, aquatic therapy, individual treatment plan, and receive, all of those words. So the diction creates the tone again, right? And what the audience hopefully is getting is, we're there for you. We're here to create a treatment plan for you in order to make you feel better. Find reduction in joint pain, find relief. And then if you look at the yellow, that's where voice comes in. Physical therapy from multiple sclerosis may. There's relief and treatment and option, and your PT. It's all about you. There's you, develop your consultation to help you achieve. And so those words really give a sense of this interaction between the writer and the reader and the patient, essentially. And that's one thing I think in the nursing programs, that's where you can bring your ideas translated from the text that you read into a forum that is much more applicable to working with people. I mean, that's what you do in psychology and in math and in science. You're going to be working with people. And even though you can tweak the formality of your writing style and voice, you also have to interact with your audience, whoever it is, and whatever assignment you're writing about. Any thoughts on this one? That's the last one that I have. Not the last slide, but the last example.
I thought it was a good example, especially considering, some of the earlier comments about the differences sometimes in the sciences, and this is a science related. So this is perfect. And I love how it really demonstrated in the beginning draft, and then boom, with some working with the student and talking about certain things over time and demonstrating and et cetera, they were able to then get to that second draft, which is much more useful, and helpful, I believe, than the first example. Mm-hmm. That probably made Amaka happy too, because she does the similar things, and regardless, even in psychology, you got to help them, build that stuff out. It just can't be the first blush. And that is what I feel sometimes, unfortunately, students will do. They just get their first blush down and leave it at that and think, well, is that good enough? Will she let me get by? Yep. And if they don't, okay, now I got to go back and add stuff. But it's almost like I'll see what I can get away with before I need to add stuff. I'm not going to go add stuff if I didn't need to, and they're going to let me get away with less. You know what I mean? I don't know if that sometimes is their approach, but it does seem like it is just get what is necessary down just to pass, and don't put any extra excitement in.
Yeah, and I think that's where we step in and say, actually, this is meaningful, because it allows me to understand how much you're learning and to what level you're learning, and how I can guide you to it. And if we don't step in, I mean, that's really our job. If we don't step in and say, this is how I can help you, try your best to integrate some of these techniques into your writing, you will become a better writer. You'll become a better person thinker, really critical thinker, and ultimately probably a better professional if you tweak these things, especially in our college courses. So yeah. All right, let me go on. So what do we learn? Having a positive process-oriented approach to writing instruction will really benefit our students. And that's the main reason why we're here. And that's what I've tried to sort of integrate into all of these sessions that I've run, is it's really important that we just sort of take that on and say, okay, I'll do my best. I'll even, integrate these professional development sessions and say, let me see if I can try them out. We won't risk too much. It will just help your students and you, really. By being able to identify specific facets such as style, tone, voice, and teaching strong writing techniques encourages students' abilities to self-reflect. And that's ultimately what we want them to do, because if they self-reflect and they know what to do, you can kind of take the training wheels off. And then finally, encouraging purposeful style and voice in academic writing will develop analytical and communication skills. So ultimately, we want to think of our students as achieving not only in our courses and eventually in our universities, but also in life. And that's really another responsibility that we have. So I really think that these skills can teach them even broader ideas about how to exist in this world. All right, thank you so much for participating. Please feel free to ask me anything about the presentation. And also, if you'd like to keep on talking about this, I'm really happy to. Please email me at kbellows@usuniversity.edu. Thank you so much. Please ask me any questions. This is your time. Or comments.
I don't have any question, but I like what Dr. Trasha said about incorporating them in your classroom, like having like probably a micro YouTube video about this, and just kill two birds with a stone. Have it already in your classroom so that probably they can use this and learn how to write better with the discussion posts and the assignments. I think that is really a good idea. I'm going to try to incorporate.
Great. Good, I'm so happy.
I'm like Dr. Bailey. I don't have a question, but I have the comment that I found the examples across the wide range of genres to be very helpful. And I think that was maybe what Amaka was asking about. And so it was good that you jumped right off into a bunch of those and showed how to develop students' writing. What I noticed, Kristen, is over all of your sessions, the most dominant theme that kept popping up was that as an instructor, you've got to get involved. You've got to meet with students and you've got to model these things and bring their attention to it. And hopefully, hold them accountable too. But hopefully they will develop these skills over time by practice and in the support of the classroom and your coaching, to where eventually it's going to create a different kind of opportunity for them in life, because people are judged by the way you write. We're judged by the way we speak, right? And et cetera. So the way you write can either open doors or close them down, or make people judge the quality of your work, or your ability to comprehend. If you sometimes are a little lax, let's say, in certain things related to quality writing. So I just think writing is so important. We think it's so basic and it's so pervasive that we sometimes forget how important it is. But you can't really do much in an online classroom if you aren't able to write and express your ideas through writing. And I'm just thankful to you, Kristen, and for all of our faculty to be able to see some of these tips, because it is a dominant sort of struggle for all of us. And I think it's more of a challenge when writing is not, and English is not your discipline of study, and therefore you're trying to work with students who have poor writing, but my discipline is whatever, nursing, or it's economics, or it's business, or other, specialty disciplines that are highly technical. and writing is not where they were prepared in their academic degree to be their expertise. So that always is just a challenge in general. Most folks aren't trained to be English or writing instructors, but I think your examples and your demonstrations allow us to be able to do that more easily if we just take one or two of your ideas and try them and just keep working at it until we get good at it. So the other thing in terms of what Amaka said about adding some micro lessons, while I think using the good examples and circling and color coding is helpful, always be careful of color because some people can't see color, certain types of color. But don't forget, there's also existing videos on YouTube if you go look for voice or how to help students with style. You may have to look at multiple videos, but you can find some short ones where someone may be going through and doing some similar things like Khriseten did. And then a student can kind of watch that because the student isn't going to show up and see this presentation. You know, it's really designed for faculty. But the point is there are these kinds of instructional tutorial video clips that exist out there that are high quality and are done by professionals that you can also integrate and front load, like we're talking about, into your courses to help support you in the development of your students' writing, in addition to you modeling and giving them examples. Any closing comments, Khriseten?
No, I'm really happy that you all could take some time out of your busy days to come, and please email me if you have any questions. And Dr. Maka, Dr. Bailey, if you would like me to send my writing your way, I'm happy to still.
And by the way, Dan and Khriseten and Norma, you're invited. And of course, Amaka, don't forget the speaker series is coming up. So y'all can again present,
Yes,
you know,
I'm sending mine in. I know it's on the first. It's on the first. I'm sending my topics in.
Good, good, good.
Excellent.
You just, for Dan and Khriseten, I already talked with Khriseten earlier, you just don't do the same topic. You can go do an advancement of your topic and a continuation of your topic, but everybody will have already seen your previous presentations through recording, so it would just have to be a new recording. But you're welcome to throw your hat in the ring and participate. These are very beneficial to our faculty, and it's a great way for you too to sort of get your information out there to your peers. Everyone have a great week. We'll talk to you soon. I'll post this recording and send it around so that you can go back and find detail and maybe review some areas if you want. Everybody enjoy your week. Take care.
Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you. Very informative. Thank you.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you very much.